Hello and welcome to this Ebbs of Mana podcast. I am interloper Keeta, and this is my friend Cade Time. And
Hello.
yes, and we decided to take a trip down memory lane because we were talking a little bit back and forth, and then we realized maybe this is something bigger than we think. But of course, remember, our thoughts and ideas are subjectory or whatever. But basically, everyone has their own thoughts and feelings. So if you don't agree, that doesn't mean they're wrong. But other people can agree. We're all gamers. We're all here under one roof. So today's topic is going to be the originals that are getting remade, and if the remakes should be continuing. And
Yes.
so, yeah, that's where we're going to start off and jump into. So, Cade, let's start off with a softball for you. What was the worst remake you ever played and why?
That was a bunch of damage on that bed with those dice. What's the worst remake experience I've had?
Exactly. And why was it the worst? What could they have done better with it? Or should they have not even touched it?
Oh. I have to think about that. Oh, okay. I think I got one. But I guess it's not like the worst. It's more of like I'm disappointed, if that's okay, instead of it being like a bad experience. So you remember
Yeah, of course.
the Secret of Mana remake for PS4, right?
Yes, I do. We were all hyped for that at one point.
Yeah, I personally don't think it's a terrible remake. I think they could have done better when it came to the graphic design for that game. And I think a lot of people didn't like it. In my opinion, I think they didn't like it was mostly because of the art design that they chose for it.
Yeah.
But other than that, I honestly think it was okay. It's like if you had an option to choose between the original Secret of Mana or the one remade for PS4, then I would by far say go for the Super Nintendo version or the one that's like on the collection of mana. Um, I would say that's the way to go. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? But like because that's kind of hard for me because like I can't think of any off the top of my head of which remake
Oh, I
is
can think of quite a
terrible.
few.
Well, you might trigger something that I might remember in my headpiece, but like I just okay. Well, here's another one besides the Secret of Mana one. The Secret of Mana is more of a disappointment than it
Yeah.
is a terrible one, but well, fuck, that one's not bad either because it's just Skyward Sword's not a bad game. It's just the
I feel like
controls.
this boy likes the remakes more than the original.
No, I like the originals. It's just I'm not gonna fault those games for being terrible if I didn't have a terrible experience, right? Like I'm willing to be like, oh, okay, I can see why people don't like this,
All
but
right,
I
let me
wouldn't
kick
say
you
they're
off
terrible.
then. All right, let's throw a few curveballs at you.
Don't do it. I know
We're
one
doing
of
it.
them's
We're
coming.
doing it.
Don't
Yeah,
don't you do
we're
it.
going to
Don't you do it.
start with the strong one. Let's do Final Fantasy VII. That remake versus the original. And remember, this game got remade a total of 3 times. It or twice because there was the PS1 version, the original. Then they
Mm,
updated it for the PS3 and then PS4 versions, and then
mm,
they did a full ground up remake for the PS4 and 5.
right.
So that is an example of all right, let's start with the curveball. Let's start with that one.
I listen. I personally like the remake of Final Fantasy VII. Okay, I think, and I know some people are gonna look at it and be like, "But it's not the classic. They could have just made it turn-based with better graphics and story and blah 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 blah." To that, yeah, it still would have made tons of money. But you also got to think, where is Final Fantasy going to continue to go in the future if turn-based kind of feels like a dying art. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
of course.
I think 7, the remake, its combat system is great. I actually really like how the combat system is, where like your basic attacks are all live action. And then when you go to cast a spell or like choose an item or something, it pretty much puts the game at a halt. Like everybody's going super slow, and then you get to choose what you want. Because in a way, it kind of is like a turn based RPG, but like a hybrid of it. It's more of an action based game than it is actually a turn based game. But the ability to slow down everything and like think of what you're going to do. And then when you do that action, you have to wait still in order for you to do that action with your action bar, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's great. That way, like, it's a hybrid of the old and the new, and people can enjoy that and have a good time. But like, there's always going to be like those classic fan base people who are going to be like, no, it's not turn based. I don't care. It sucks. And it's like, why don't you just give it a chance? You would have a valid opinion if you just played the game and you said, hey, it's just not my cup of tea because I like the original more. I like the turn based style better because that's what I like instead of saying it's terrible because it's not a terrible game,
It's
right?
not by any
Now,
means.
right. So like that's one thing. Now, am I going to say it's better than the original?
Are you?
Well, it would to me I would be biased if I'm going to be honest because I would. Oh, that's so hard because all right, the old me really wants to say turn based because I really like turn based games,
All right,
but
take
as
out
a
the turn base and what you're seeing so far. Do you agree with the direction that Final Fantasy VII is taking?
yes, because the road that they're taking is inevitable. So if they work on it now, the more games they make that are action based, we'll have a better idea how they're gonna want their game to be, and they'll be more knowledgeable on what to do and what not to do. If that makes sense.
Of course, and see, that's where I kind of have to agree with you. Final Fantasy VII, the original, compared to the remake, I
Mm-hmm.
really like the remake. I like what they're doing, and I like how they had the fates trying to keep the storyline to how it was supposed to go.
Mm-hmm.
And but the thing is, as well, is it's the Final Fantasy VII in the middle, where it tried to implement some new things, but still kept the turn base and everything. I'm a little
Mm-hmm.
irritated with that because I think all the other quote unquote Final Fantasy remakes, hint hint 1 through 6, I could be
Huh.
wrong, but they allow you to always have your limit break on.
It's been a while since I played the older ones.
Yeah,
What I remember correctly, and I don't mean to cut you off,
yeah, no,
but what
you're
I
good.
remember correctly is you would work to earn your alt basically, and
Exactly.
then once you use it, that's your hurrah, that's your pow, and then you have to work to get it again. Now I think 9 does this because it's been a while since I played the other classic ones, and I own all of them. By the
Yeah,
way, I own from 1 all the way to um, 15. I don't have 13 because, well, we can have that as a different subject on a podcast next time.
oh yeah, I'll tell you how
So,
13 is the most amazing, groundbreaking game that Final Fantasy has released. And you, of course, will sit there and agree with me.
oh yeah, 100% agree. It's such a good game. Every character is exactly like the other characters, except for one really cool one that they basically just pooped on. Anyway,
Well, that's because
but
he
back.
deserved it. Anyway, back to the
What?
discussion. Anyway, we're not on that topic. We're
Oh,
on this one.
all right. Okay. All right. We're gonna just brush that off. We'll save that for next time.
Oh
But
yeah, next time.
no, but I think 9 does that where if you gain your alt, let's say, and you don't use it, it carries on to the next fight.
Oh,
You know
see,
what I
that's
mean?
not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about
Oh.
is in the remakes. Like, if you booted up Final Fantasy VII that you bought, That was
Right.
just a remake of the old one.
Mm-hmm.
It has in the options where you can have the limit break always on. And remember, you can also manipulate how much XP you gain from fights, and you can just mess with the whole game, which is stupid.
Well, well, okay. I was the first thing I thought of was like, why would you want to do that? That kind of ruins your experience, right?
Yeah,
But hear me out. And I thought about this. I'm like, well, what if it is that someone's already beaten uh the original Final Fantasy VII remake, right?
yeah,
And they want to just like fly through it for like I don't know, like achievements or something. I feel like that's fine to have ultimates that way because you could do more damage and it means faster fights to be done, and you just haste through the thing, you know. Which I think that's fine. But like on like a first playthrough, I would just be like, don't just keep it the way that it was supposed to
yeah.
be.
See, and that's my issue. Is right out the gate you can unlock those in the like the digital versions of Final Fantasy 1 through 7 or 8. I think it's up to where that's what they included into it was you can manipulate the XP and always have your limits on, which is fun and all, but then again it takes out the challenge and the experience that you get
Right.
from having to grind, having to level, having to do all this other stuff that built onto that story.
Yeah, that's that's fair. Well, like you could. It's so weird about Final Fantasy games, right? Um, it's weird that we're talking about remakes and stuff, and we're just pretty much sitting here talking about Final Fantasy. But I mean, feel like Final Fantasy is like a good spot to talk about in this subject because there's a good portion of like remakes of like Final Fantasy games, so it kind of fits in there.
Oh,
But
don't
it's
worry, the
like
next curveballs are coming. This was just the first. This was a softie for you. This was to
this was
get
a
your juicy
softball.
ones flowing.
I, I
Yes.
I get the feeling that the one I'm thinking of is you and I are actually going to slightly argue about
Maybe.
it,
We'll have to see,
but
of course.
um, but yeah, it's so weird because like if you pick 8 as an example, I think Pro Jared does a really good example of like why the leveling system is kind of whack, you
Oh yeah,
know?
no, eight's leveling system from the get go. That reminds me of Final Fantasy X's leveling system. I love the sphere grid, but
Mhm.
I love how they kept it and didn't make it so you can manipulate XP or anything. So personally, that was my favorite, like full remake that they did, which it was
Mhm.
shot for shot the same game. It just updated graphics, updated music, and all that stuff.
Right. Mhm. Yeah. No, it's good. But eight's always had that flaw of like if I remember correctly, and I could be wrong, so just throwing it out there, I
Yeah,
could be wrong. But I think the leveling system for eight can be broken right out the gate. And then once you start playing it enough and you start to realize the leveling system doesn't really
here's a
matter.
secret: any Final Fantasy game can be broken, even the original 7, if
Oh, of course.
you prioritize what you're leveling, and especially with the materia, how it levels with battles, you're able to manipulate that, and then soon you'll have Firaga right as soon as you leave Midgar, putting you well above where you should be.
Right, but in 8 you can steal like
Oh, true.
spells and stuff.
Yes.
So the thing
Yes.
is that the junction system is based upon the items that you have in your inventory, and a huge way of getting like the coolest stuff in the game is like right in the beginning of 8.
That
So you have to
is
go
true.
around stealing stuff. So like you get like one really cool thing from the T-Rex, but the thing about the T-Rex is that that thing will kill you. It will one shot you so hard.
Yes, it will.
And the thing is, it's hard to steal from that guy, right? You know, you
Yeah,
put him to sleep, and you're trying to steal things from them, and you will get some stuff, but like try to get 99 things of them. And that's the other thing about 8 is that in order to get a higher stat, let's say you need something from like, oh, I don't know, let's say like a Phoenix Town or whatever. I know someone who's going to listen to this in the future is going to be like, that doesn't, whatever. It's not the point. It's just an example. My
true.
point is that you get an item, and that item has specific like heavy stats for whatever, you're going to need 99 stacks of those. Okay? And it's not just like I have 99 stacks of these for all my characters. No. You gotta grind 99 for each player if you want them to have that stack. Which is the reason why they probably sped up the game, because they knew that players grind for all those stats, and sitting there and playing it in actual real time takes for freaking ever to
See,
grinding 899 for everyone.
I would say that you have a valid point there, but I have a class of game that just destroys your rebuttal instantly.
Hmm.
MMO. MMO RPGs.
Yeah, but that's different though.
No, think about Final Fantasy 14 online. There was a good chance
We
where
weren't
I
counting
was.
about 14 though, Cole. We're not counting that. We're talking about
Okay.
actual turn-based
Or
RPGs.
okay, let's
Okay.
talk about this. Like you say, people grinding for the same item. Think about some of these MMO players who have grinded the same level, the same game, the same thing on probably multiple characters for hours
No,
just to
I
hope.
understand that, because no, the reason why I say that's different, because I was one of those guys. I played WoW that was like that. I played MMOs that were like that. It's different because you're not grinding to stat your character like you do in Final Fantasy VIII. Okay?
You're
You do
just
grind.
statting for a drop that can only happen once a week.
No. That's different though. You know, you're actually having fun when you're grinding those. Like here's an example. Not the Nexus, but what's that raid in Wrath of the Lich King? The main raid. It might be the Nexus. I can't remember. I used to grind those every week, and I had a good time every time because it was a social interaction. The bosses were fun to play, and I was confident about my character, so I had no worries of choosing my time to grind on something like that. The difference between the MMO and Final Fantasy VIII is that you're not grinding 99 items for each character
That's
all in one
true.
sitting, or whatever the amount of time you choose in there. Because on WoW I was perfectly fine doing that, because I can be like, you know what, I'm going to do this later, and there's a bunch of other things I can do. You go to Final Fantasy VIII and you go, oh, I'm going to do something else, and you want to fight enemies, you're going to get wrecked because you don't have the items to build up the stat for that character. That's the difference between WoW's MMO and maybe a couple other MMOs and Final Fantasy VIII. Final Fantasy's junction system heavily relies on the items you have. And I say this because let's say you grinded 99 potions, okay? And
Yes,
they give you a huge percentage of your HP, all right?
of course.
You grind 99 of those potions, and let's say you don't have a healer, so you start using those potions. The more you use the potion, the lesser the stat you have. That's why I say it's different.
It is. It is. All right. All right. See,
You
you
just
got
wanted to get my goat!
a little bit because the next juices are going to be flowing. Let's start this
Oh my
next
god.
ball. Let's go with Resident Evil 2.
Well, you and I will have an understanding for two. It's the next one that I know you're going to throw at me that's not a curveball. It's just going to be a direct home run.
Oh, you mean it's going to be a hit by pitch?
All right. Continue on what you're going to say, sir.
All right, so how do you feel about the Resident Evil 2 remake where they changed it up to where they
I'm sorry
took
about
out.
that, folks.
It's all good. So, how do you feel about the Resident Evil 2, the way they changed up the way the story was told out, as well as the zap items?
It's a little the remake story wise kind of throws you off a bit,
Yeah,
right? Because they kind of like take parts of it and put it in the remake of 3, which we'll probably get there during this episode. But like, I'm personally okay with 2. They honestly, 2 is probably one of the best remakes of any game I've ever seen, even with the story. You know, so like the way they started off. he's a rookie cop. He's driving into town. He goes to that gas station, and he goes in there. He sees people that are hurt. He goes into the one room. Oh my god, it's a zombie! You kill the zombie. You get the key. You run out. There's more zombies. Like, I think that's cool because it adds more flair to the story. It's not like a heavy part of the story, but it keeps you invested, and now you're interested. You know, and so, like, you meet another person there, obviously Claire, and then once you go through that, you do whatever. Now, the original, I feel like, is the same thing, but because of the hardware limitations, they had to do it the way they did it. And obviously, the story is most likely the same from the remake to the original. Most likely. There are a few changes, and everybody knows that who's played it.
See, I would agree with you, except kind of, and I could demonstrate how the original differed from the remake. Because in the original, you only found notes that led up to why Chief Irons was as creepy as he was. It never came out and fully
Forgot about
explained
irons.
it exactly. It only let your imagination run wild where why is he trying to cover up, and the more notes you find the more it's like, oh, this guy's actually a pretty bad dude who's in the pocket of Umbrella. But in the remake they just come out and he straight up tries to murk a kid, and
Yeah, they
that's
they
where it's
made him
like
more of just a creep instead of being like part of the actual like bigger picture of the story. Makes sense. Yeah.
exactly. And see, that's the thing, it's where his part in the story fit in so well, especially where he had what, the mayor's daughter on his desk in the original, I think it was.
Yeah.
And in the remake, it's in the orphanage where she's splayed out on a table.
Hmm.
Now, see, that's the type of story elements I'm talking about, is where they will alter stuff, and that does have an impact on the game because then it changes the whole story and can retcon items that were in the original that are no longer viable because this remake came out and they like the remake so much that it's like, oh, nope, this is the story of how it happened. Because in the original, it was a little longer, especially with both playthroughs of Leon and
Hmm.
Claire. You met
Right.
the gun store owner Kendo, which I actually like how they gave him a reason in the remake more than just, oh, he got ate by zombies in the beginning. There's nothing to him.
Right.
But with that, it throws into remakes taking shape into remakes to reimaginings to retellings.
Hmm.
Each remake falls into that, and I think when they announce a remake, it's fallen into those categories because the true remakes are like Banjo Kazooie when that one got remade for the Xbox.
Hmm.
Banjo Kazooie 1, better music, better graphics, everything flowed perfectly with how you would love a Banjo Kazooie game to flow. And they even
Hmm.
implemented saving your jiggies that you collected or the notes, the music notes in certain levels, like Rusty Bucket Bay. That level
Hmm.
can burn in hell. But anyway, it'll save your notes. So even if you've collected X amount, it helps you achieve that 100% ranking a little better.
Yeah, but weren't you able to collect notes in two also? Like, they had their own little file, right?
Well, no. In 1 and 2, if you died in a world, those notes, you'd have to reset collecting them in the originals.
And Resident Evil?
Oh, no, in Banjo Kazooie. In the
Oh, oh,
files,
oh.
yeah, no, you kept them. But I'm saying, like, for a true shot for shot remake, that was a better thing. But in Resident Evil 2, I honestly have to agree with you where the remake was actually better than the original just because
Hmm.
of how they added certain things. They kept certain elements. I
Hmm.
just wish they differed the storylines a bit more.
I wonder if they actually thought about what you were talking about and they made the decision that, like, well, part of that doesn't make any sense for whatever reason it may be. I'm not saying it's an okay thing to go and do, but I wonder if they thought about changing it to try and make it fit better for a certain thing within the story. You know what I mean?
Of course, and see, that's what I agree with. Is like because the reason the original was so creepy is because you had the fixed camera angles, you couldn't see around corners, and like what they carried over to the remake is something I love is ammo consumption.
Oh
Be
yeah.
sparing with your ammo. The only thing I wish that would have differed, like I said, between the original and the remake is the different paths you take. Because in the remake, you both fight William Birkin at the both
Yeah.
same stages. The only thing different is doesn't Claire get a train fight in the remake? But
Mm.
otherwise, it's basically following the same path. There's little divergence to see what the other person was doing at different times in the story. And
Mm-hmm.
that kind of ruined it for me a little bit. And that's why I give a point to the original, is because the original kept that. You play Leon's story, okay. Anything you do as Leon, you go through as Claire. That playthrough is Claire now. If there was a shotgun, you can't pick up a shotgun because Leon picked it up. If there was
Right, and that would make sense.
XYZ, exactly. But if there was XYZ done, you'd either have an easier time or a harder time going through Claire's story
Uh-huh.
because of what Leon did or didn't do or pick up.
Mhm. Right. Yeah. No, that makes sense. And it also adds to the world that you're in, you know, because you're like, oh, this is a gun where Leon would get. And then you kind of piece it together. You're like, hey, wait a minute. I'm here at the same time that, well, it feels like it would be the same time that like Leon would have been here, but the gun is gone. But in reality, what it is that you just came in there after Leon just picked it up, you know?
Exactly.
And those are cool little pieces to be like, oh wow, okay, that adds to the world of whatever I'm doing. And yeah, I like that stuff about when games do that. But I will say, uh, I think the remake's in the right direction of how the Resident Evil game should go. I love
Yeah,
the classics. Like, don't get me wrong, I love the classics for the simple fact that like when you play an original Resident Evil game, um, people are gonna hate the tank controls, but the tank controls was like a hardware limitation. But I would also argue, besides of it being a hardware limitation, it really did make you think on what you need to do. Because if you are in a mob of zombies and you got tank controls, you are gonna have a bad time if you're not gonna strategize your stuff. You're gonna need to learn how to bob and weave. You need to learn how to like strategize what weapons are more powerful towards what enemies, and also you need to be like, well, how much ammunition do I have? Because if I waste on all these like walking zombies and I run into like a dog or whatever those frog creatures are, right? You're gonna have a bad time. So I always liked the originals a little bit more in the sense of a gameplay aspect because I like strategizing about things. Like that's my favorite thing about games is being able to go, okay, what am I going to do here with this item and this item? I have this key item that allows me to solve a puzzle, but I don't know what the puzzle is going to be like. And if there's a puzzle where it's like, oh, like that one room where it's like you move that one item where like, oh no, the ceiling is collapsing and now you have to think on your feet. If you don't have that item, you're going to have a hard time. And even if you know how to do that puzzle, let's say you have a hard time with tank controls, you're going to die most likely. So you need to learn how those tank controls work while it's in combat, while you're in puzzles, and just how you maneuver the area. Like it's a huge different like gameplay style compared to two's remake. Like say if you go
it
from the
really
original two
is.
to the remake. And I think they're both good in their own right because when 4 came out, which was like the pioneer for like all of the other Resident Evil games until 7 came out because now it's in this weird ordeal of do we want tank controls or do we want more like action based controls or do we want first person controls? And I'm like,
Exactly.
and honestly, I like all three of them. I'm
Same
not gonna
here.
lie, they're
Because,
all
see,
good.
I played the remake of Resident Evil 1 and the original Resident Evil 2, and the remake.
Mhm.
And like I said, I just feel like the part in Resident Evil 2 when they did the remake that killed it for me. And this is why I have to say, in the end, the point has to go for the OG Resident Evil, is
Mhm.
because I'm a story driven player. And
Yeah.
that's what I love and love to follow. And if the
Mhm.
game doesn't have that story there where it lets your mind also, because players aren't stupid, if
Right.
you let your imagination run wild, because it's like movies, if it hints to someone getting killed off screen, your mind's going to fill in the blanks.
Right. And that's, well, that's like the Pulp Fiction thing, right? Where like, what's in the suitcase? They don't tell
Exactly.
you. And it's meant to be that way. It's like a cliffhanger where your brain is like, what's in the suitcase? Like, what is in that suitcase? I need to know. But the beauty of it is that your brain's gonna wonder what it is, depending what you've watched through the movie, you know? So it's gonna be like one of
Exactly.
those options, which I agree with you on that. You know, like I think the remake of two is a fantastic game and storytelling and gameplay and characters, but I will have to say that the originals left your mind wondering. And if you've never had an experience where your brain creatively creates its own things, where you go, well, man, I might be wrong about this thing, but that idea that I just thought of is wicked, you know, like you're missing out, you know, like it's
Oh,
one of those things
exactly.
where your brain just like explodes in dopamine because you're like, whoa, I just thought of this. And maybe somebody else has already thought about it before, but you thinking about that, even though if it's wrong or right or whatever the outcome may be, it's just a fun thing to do. It's fun to sit there and imagine what things could be, you know?
Exactly.
And
I fully agree with you on that as well.
mm-hmm. You know,
Now, see, are you ready for the hit by pitch?
lay it on me, Daddy O.
All right. So, through all the years of remakes and retellings, reimaginings, what was your view on Resident Evil 3?
The remake?
Yep, compared to
So
the original.
here's the thing. I think the original is better, but I don't think three is a terrible remake. How everybody else likes to shoehorn their answers in. Now,
Now,
granted,
come on. Resident Evil 3 is like Resident Evil 5 where Chris was punching a boulder. I want to hear
no,
your defense
no,
on this.
no, because dude, I like Jill as a character in three, but I also like her character in the remake. Okay, three is not that bad of a game. All right, I I smashed the dog shit out of that game. Okay, like I like that game. Does it have flaws? Of course it does. It's made by the B team of fucking Resident Evil and Capcom's fucking thing. All right, but I don't think it's a terrible game. Fucking dude, Nemesis chases you everywhere. Fucking, well, almost everywhere.
I was going to say
Um,
he doesn't chase you everywhere. There's some safe spots I've found. So,
I know. I've done it too. But like I like Jill as a character. I like the way they start off the story. I like how fucking it shows the other side of the story when it comes to the remake of two. You know, granted, there are some scenes in certain areas, so I was like, well, why did that need to be in there? You guys have a
or
weird fetish.
taking out levels.
They took out the clock tower, but to be fair,
They
in
also
my
took out
opinion,
the Gravedigger.
to be fair, I'm pretty sure the clock tower was an optional thing.
Are you sure about that?
Yeah.
Are you
Well, then you
positive?
you you explain to me why it's part of the story of three.
No, no, no. This is you defending it. Why
No, no,
was
no,
it
no, no,
not
no.
essential?
If you're not going to oppose a question of that and give me an answer to it, why am I here? Like this is a dialogue. We're having a conversation. We're supposed to be
It
bantering
is.
back and forth.
Well,
That's
the
why I was
whole
asking. Like,
thing is it's not just the clock tower. Remember,
I
they
know it.
removed the
I
city hall, the press
yeah,
office,
of
the
course.
dead factory.
No, I those things like I honestly think like okay, I don't think that um it was good for them to take those out. right? And I do oppose the question like, do those really need to be in there? Because it felt more like in the originals, not the other ones, but with the Gravedigger and the Clock Tower, like you could go there if you wanted to, but then you could just continue without going over there. Like those are optional things. So, but I think they would have had a better fucking feedback if they would have just put all of that stuff in there. Don't get me wrong. I understand that the things they took out makes it a little less exciting for the game. Is the best way I can put it.
See, the
Like
thing
honestly,
is, with them removing that, it made it more linear rather than open worldy.
it is very linear. And three was, I wouldn't say it was super open worldy, but it was open worldy enough to be like, oh, okay, I can roam around this town, and there's different parts of this town that have things like going to the clock tower was super cool, and that dig graver site was pretty cool, and they should have fucking left those in there, and I understand that, but I still think that game is still a pretty good game. It's not the best game, right?
Yeah,
Like you give me an option to play, hey, Resident Evil 6 or remake of 3. 3 hands down. 6 was fucking trash. Okay? And I would do the same for 5. I would pick 3 over 5. Now 5 is goofy, all right, whatever. Boulder punching Chris, superhero, whatever. But I liked 3. There were good elements in 3. You can't tell me there wasn't. You didn't
yes,
think that
but see,
scene?
the thing is, imagine if they included the clock tower. It would have changed
Oh.
that game from a fast pace. And here's my rebuttal to you:
Mm,
is it would have changed the game completely from run and gun action to a slower pace like the original Resident Evil 3. It would reintroduce atmospheric horror for what was in it, like
oh yeah.
Resident Evil 1 and 2 had. But the thing is, with that theme and everything getting removed, it just felt like an action game to what the original Resident Evil 4 was compared to 7, the remake of 2 that they had done, and so on. It felt like it was
Mm,
going to be grouped into 4, 5, and 6. Because, I mean, you have to remember, in that
mm-hmm.
clock tower, Jill's rescue was botched. Jill
Mm-hmm.
slaps Carlos,
Mm-hmm.
and that's where she gets poisoned by Nemesis.
Mm-hmm.
And there was even a music puzzle in it, which in the remake didn't even have any of that.
Mm-hmm.
So you have
Yeah.
to wonder, were they just trying to appease people who were more into action games, or the people who were more into horror with the remake of RE3? And that's the whole thing, is if they were trying to keep it horror, Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 4 plus Resident Evil 7 and Resident
Mm-hmm.
Evil 8, mommy, did that all wonderfully.
Mommy, I mean,
We all
mommy.
know about the tall vampire lady and her vampire daughters, okay? We're but
The Dommy Mommy Vamp Mommy. I
exactly,
mean,
the
Mommy.
dominant mommy, vamp mommy.
Well, here's what I think. Okay,
Yeah,
like like if we're gonna like have an actual conversation without us yelling at each other back and forth, I think, and it could be different, I could be wrong, but what I think what it was is that you had the A team working on 2. And that's like the main people who work on the Resident Evil games. I mean, look at Resident Evil
yeah,
4.
yeah,
Resident Evil 4 was the same team that worked on Resident Evil 2. And you can totally tell it shows.
yeah.
Okay. Now, the B team made Resident Evil 3. And I think what it was is that they didn't have enough time or resources, which I think the resource part is a bit dumb because it works on the same engine. But um, they didn't have as much time and resources for like Team A did. And I think they probably made a decision in the room where it was like, okay, we could still make this game fun to play. We might botch some of the things in the story, maybe a little bit of the characters, but we at least got to get the gameplay to be decently fun. And I think they followed in the footsteps of the original 4 because the remake of 4 wasn't out at the time. And then they also followed the footsteps in the remake of 2.
See, I would agree to that, but on the other hand, it is the shortest game out of all the Resident Evils so far.
Yeah, but okay. See, that's the thing though. Like everyone says, like, ah, it's the shortest game. I'm like, dude, you can beat almost every Resident Evil under an hour, and that's just the thing. Like I think people should just play the game and have a good time, and then after they play it to have a good time, they can be like, hey, I want to speed run this game. I want to see how fast I could beat this. And which that was the cool thing about Resident Evil 3 is that once you beat it, you started getting points to unlock items to beat it faster. And I did that, and it was a good time. However, I wish there was a missionary thing in there.
Yeah,
Well,
but what
whatever.
about the game lacking areas with lengthy gameplay? But the remake of 3 was basically interrupted constantly with a bunch of cutscenes and set pieces that forced you to do walking simulator. What are your takes on that?
That is a bad thing on their part. I think what they should have done, if they were gonna make it to where you get to play it multiple times to get a bunch of cool stuff, is to be able to skip those scenes. Like that. Okay, like that one room. You know how in 3 where Carlos is like, spoilers if none of y'all have played it, but I mean, like, go out there and play it. It's there, or go watch it on like YouTube or something if you're never gonna play it. It's whatever. But spoilers, if you wanna play it, this would be the part to stop at. But you know that scene where Carlos takes her in the hospital, and then you have to go and get the vaccine
Yeah,
to cure her, and then once you go and get the vaccine and cure her, you have to go out. Pardon me. And like protect it with like a bunch of those zombies coming in and whatnot. I think that was a little weak, in my opinion. I
it
think
was because it was just a time segment that you just had to survive.
yes, it is a time segment. Like don't get me wrong. There are things in that game where I'm like, yeah, this doesn't make you look good. All right, but I still think that game is a fun time because there's a scene in that game where some people might be like, "Oh wow, that was a whack scene," but I was like, "What are you talking about?" Like, she's funny, she's quippy, and she's a badass. There was one scene where it is kind of goofy, but um, you know, 3 has its moments. But there was a scene, where fucking Nemesis runs out and he's on fire and he's like, oh, oh, and he like splashes into the water, right? And she's like,
Exactly.
she can't swim. That was hilarious, but also badass at the same time. It's not like super duper badass, you know, like at the end of the game. And there are better one-liners that you could have used, but that's a great line. Like, it's hilarious. It's not a terrible line. There's so many people that are just like, that game's terrible. There's no good lines. Whatever. It's like, dude, like, there are games way worse than this. But I get it. It's your favorite franchise, and it didn't lead up to your standards of it. I get that. I have my situations to where I like things where they don't meet up to my standards. But at the same time, we can have these opinions about them, but it doesn't change the fact that it turned out to be that way. And I think the reason why 3 turned out to be the way it was is because they didn't have enough time or money to do so. Now, here's the thing, they probably could have took a way better route than what they did. And you know what? I'm going to say they could have had a better route than that because when you get 3, you get what, that pointless garbage ass wannabe Dead by Daylight game, right?
Of
I wonder
course.
I wonder if that was a ploy to try to get money out of people, which I feel it totally was, and it never caught on. And
Yeah.
you and I have talked about this situation, and also you and I have talked about if they really wanted to go that route with like money and battle pass stuff, it probably should have been um Outbreak.
I agree with you fully on that.
That I honestly think that would have been such a better outcome for Capcom. One, you could charge for levels, right? Like let's say you have the original Outbreak and you have a good decent amount of levels. Now you have a battle pass for only aesthetics, right? We don't want to have them getting items to where they get better. If they had just a battle pass for aesthetics, for like your guns, for like your character's clothing, or for like titles, or whatever the situation may be, that would be great because I would not mind buying like new maps at some point, because if they put a lot of effort into it and there's like puzzles and like all these cool things, I wouldn't mind buying like a $20 DLC for like what, like four extremely well done maps, and then the next one comes out and does that. Like I would not have a problem with that, because you're paying for maps to where everyone can have a good time and they each have like their own part of the storyline, and like you could do all this other cool shit. That would be fantastic. But I will say, I know 3 didn't add up to people's like expectations. And you know what? I can't fault them for that. Because my
Well, you
opinion is
can't.
exactly.
Well, the
But I
thing
think
is, as well as you're not realizing, is that Nemesis in the original, you didn't know when he was going to come. He was going to be a challenge. And in the remake, it felt like there was basically too much ammo. And Nemesis was on a set path where he was easy to walk around or avoid altogether.
I don't know. I do like the expectations of not knowing when he's gonna come around. Because like, yes, it does feel like it's a railroad experience, right? Because if you go and play it again, it's all gonna be the same thing again. So like, yeah, uh, people want that random expectations because in the original, you if you go to one thing, you'll get to pick like an option, and then like when Nemesis shows up, you could choose an option of what you want to do. Now, I think that would have been really cool if they did something like that in 3, but also at the same time, if they did it exactly like the original, I think it would kind of break the immersion. So what I think what they should have done, and just you know hear my opinion on it and hear my suggestion, what they should have done is that you can pick different routes in the game that would determine on what outcome turns what, without the game pausing and being like, you want to go this way or do you want to go this way? Because here's how I see it. If you go like left, something happens, whatever it turns out to be, and that's without the game pausing to tell you, hey, this breaks immersion. Which, as a little side note, like there's some people who get upset when they have to pause the game and then pick an item and then unpause it because it breaks the immersion. So I think the way to like kind of have like a middle ground as an equal thing is like have it to where whatever detour you take will will precisely end in the same way as the other side, but the way you start whatever detour you go to is a different way that leads to the same ending. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. But see, that's why I still have to give this to the original over the remake of Resident Evil 3, is
Yeah.
because it was more expansive. It was just a well done game. Because back then, games, you couldn't pump it out and
Mhm.
basically be like, oh, people will buy this, or if they don't, we're still good. No, a
Well,
company's
actually,
reputation was based on their game.
I'm pretty sure 3 came out a year after too.
Yes, it did, but just because it had a short development cycle doesn't mean it's not good. Because the same thing happened with Majora's Mask, if I remember correctly.
No, I agree, but imagine if those had more time.
Yeah, if they had more time, it would be amazing.
Oh yeah, it'd be much better. But yeah, no, I would have to agree that the original is a better experience, um, because of like how it is with like the in my opinion, tank controls, the outcomes, the certain areas that were taken out of the reimagine. Now, the reimagine is just my opinion. I think it's still a pretty good game. Okay, but if we were to compare the original to the remake without biases, the original wins by far. Okay.
Exactly, by far. See, at least you agree with me.
Yeah. Well, I'm not gonna like say the remake is better than the original because it's objectively it's not. Okay.
Yeah,
And you're gonna have some of those that are like, well, the remake is better because it doesn't have tank controls, which is a shitty argument to fucking throw out there, right?
exactly.
So I think that the remake is still good. Would it be better if it didn't have that other crappy game mode that they have, which was a separate download, and took
Oh,
out like a couple other things?
yes, I
Yeah.
remember what they did. It was basically like Saw and DVD, but it
Mm-hmm.
was severely one sided. It
Mm-hmm.
was Resident Evil Resistance, wasn't it?
Oh god, don't even get me started, dude. That game was broken the day it came out, and when they tried patching all that stuff, it was still broken. If you were like the bad guy, you would win. You just spam a bunch of stuff. You send a big guy out there, and then you transport to the big guy, and you just knock the entire other team out. And that was it, dude. It was like that's, hmm, mm. It was
Yeah, that
terrible.
was
And then
rough.
the other game they had, I forgot what the other Resident
It
Evil
was
game was.
basically RE Verse, I think, where it was a
Yeah,
huge battle royale, which I
it
did
was.
try that game, and it was it's really easy to win, and I got all the trophies easily within one day, and it was just
Mhm,
like this isn't really a challenge. Now, God love them, they're still going on it. They're still releasing content for it. Once you buy the
mm.
battle pass once, from what I see, is you've never had to repurchase it. So that's a godsend right there. But
A step in the right direction.
exactly, but overall, it just felt like yes, each character had their own abilities and everything. It was Resident Evil characters versus Resident Evil characters. When you died, you came back as one of the mutations, depending on how many vials you found of the virus. So you can
That's
end
interesting.
up coming back as Mr. X, Jack, or other variants of the T virus.
Mhm,
So, but with all that being said, it could have been executed a little better, at least.
mhm. Yeah, yeah. I don't know. I will objectively say that the original to three is way better than the remake. But I do like a lot of the things that they did with the remake of three. Now, I think they should have kept all of the original stuff in three and only made changes if they needed to make things make more sense in a way. You know what I mean? Because
See, I agree
obviously,
with that.
because obviously, taking out the clock tower. Now, I still have that thought of like, does it really need to be in there? I don't know. Maybe I'm like about it. It's still a really good place to go to, and it's really fun to do. But it would have been so much better, and they probably would have had way more sales, and it probably would have not been panned as bad if they would have kept all the stuff that was in three and and made it as close to the original that they could. Because see how I would have done it, as I was telling you, because like you know how like you have certain detours that say you want to go this way and it does a certain outcome, and it goes this way and it does a certain outcome, and I kind of explained it earlier.
Of
I would have
course.
made it to where it was seemingly to where whatever detour you go to is a different outcome that leads to the same end goal, and that would have been so much better because you're not being stopped by text, okay? And don't get me wrong, the text thing not going to bother me. I grew up in that era where it was like text box or pausing a screen to grab an item or switch an item to change back to the game mode. None of that's going to ruin my immersion. But let's be honest with ourselves, the next generations that are be coming out are going to be super spoiled when it comes to games just seamlessly doing things without having to take a break and come back to it, no matter how long the transitions are. That's why I was saying it would have been so much better if they would have made it to where, okay, well, here's Raccoon City. On this side, it does whatever, and Nemesis does a crazy thing or two. And then on this side, it's let's say it's not Nemesis, but it's like a bunch of crazy monsters and different puzzles that do other things. Because they could have totally made it to where it was like one side has one piece of the puzzle that takes one whole game playthrough to get through. And then let's say you play it again to do the other side, it's a different puzzle for that playthrough. So you get to choose what option you want to do and what puzzle you want to do. You're not going to know what puzzles those are until you both play it, you know, from one game through from the other to the other game play. So like I think that would have been a smarter idea, and I think people would have like remembered it a lot more.
I
You know what I
agree
mean?
with you there, full heartedly.
So like I said, like I understand why people don't like three, but I think it's kind of crude to say that three was a terrible game because it obviously does have good things in it. You know, maybe
It
not as
does.
like a whole item, but like I think that the dodge mechanic's pretty good. I think the gameplay is seamless. The graphics are still pretty good. The characters are still pretty great. Nemesis, as brooding as he is, he's not gonna like add up to like the original Nemesis,
Oh,
but
not at all.
he's still scary and he still does crazy things and like you know I'm sure that like if we found a way to like instead of frantically running around trying to kill him, if we found a way to just watch what animations he has, they probably put a lot of effort into Nemesis's design and some of the quirks that he has. We just don't notice it while we play. You know what I
Fair
mean?
point. Fair point.
So there's a lot of stuff that probably has gone into three, but because the gameplay doesn't add up to people's expectations, they kind of just go, "Man, it's not that great."
Yeah,
But that's totally understandable. That's like a casual player's standpoint, right?
it is. It
And
is.
maybe and maybe some hardcore fans that are expecting something that just didn't turn out their expectations. That's how I feel on it. Okay, I know the last time we talked about this, it was a heated conversation.
Oh yeah,
But
because I mean, you were clearly wrong, and you didn't want to agree.
no. I wasn't wrong. It's just that at the time I was busy playing Siege with you and another person, and it's hard to come up with like things to say about that when I'm trying to focus on not dying, even though I died.
See, even if you believed in it, you would still have an easier coming up with solutions if you really believed in it. So therefore, I will take that as a
No, don't
victory.
don't fucking put that out there like that, because that's not true. No, but I will say, because like in a serious outcome, because there's times where I'm joking around and whatever, but like if we were to actually have a conversation about this in the most honest way, the original is better. I don't think the remake is a terrible game. Could it have been better? By far, it could have been better. Like
Yeah, it could have
way
been.
better.
The
You
thing
know.
is, with the
Well,
remake, you could beat it way quicker than any other Resident Evil.
couldn't you beat that with the original that way too? It was.
I
I mean,
don't
like you may
think
not.
so.
I could have swore that the original was probably you could beat that quicker than any other original Resident Evil game.
Let me
From
see.
like from 3 to 1, I think you can. And if not, then I'm wrong.
So
It's
the
been a while since I.
original Resident Evil 3 takes about 6 hours to complete. Or no, that was the remake, if you're just playing it for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And so here's a list from OSG Old School Gamers on what is the shortest Resident Evil. Shortest Resident Evil is Survivor at 2 hours. Longest Resident Evil is 6 at
Okay.
21.5 hours.
Are we really gonna count Survivor as? Is it actually? Before I say something stupid, is Survivor part of the main storyline?
I believe it is.
It's so bad, though. It's so
I
bad.
know, right?
It's so bad.
And
Uh,
Resident Evil 6 clocks in at the 21-hour mark, which is really weird that they jump times
well, I
in
think
that way.
for six is because they had like what I think 4 different stories you had to go through. Maybe that's more or less. I don't know. I didn't really play six because I started Leon's campaign and I was like, listen, I like Leon and I like how gritty it is, but this just does not feel like a Resident Evil game to me. So
Yeah,
I
but
just dropped
remember,
it.
Resident Evil 2 as well gave us the survivors that never were, Plus, it introduced or reintroduced a character that had gone MIA ever since Operation Raccoon City, and that
And that's
was
Hank,
Hunk.
right? Oh,
Hunk,
it was
not
Hank.
Hank.
Okay.
Hank, I
I'm sorry.
sell propane and propane accessories. You're going to get killed by fire.
Whoa! Get the fire, boy.
But was that the curveball you were expecting? Is the Resident Evil 3?
Well, I had a feeling it was coming, if I was going to be honest, because
Yes.
like you could tell from what I said earlier, and yeah. Is there really anything else to say about that though? Because I feel like you and I, we agree to disagree on things, but
We
also at
did,
the same
yes.
time, like there's a lot of things that we do agree upon. Like I
Of
honestly think
course.
they should have gone with that route that I
Agreed.
explained
And
earlier.
see, we already agree that the original is better. Now, I think all this boils down to, and I can say this easily, is being a cash grab for companies. Because think about Super Mario 64, for example, right?
Okay.
Amazing, groundbreaking game.
Mhm.
They made Super Mario All Stars for the Switch. Have you played it?
Super Mario All Stars. Are you talking about the one with the three games that they had? And it
Yep.
was like a limited time thing.
Yep.
Yeah, I used to own that.
Yeah. Did you ever notice how the controls were laggy?
It was basically those ones ran off of like some kind of emulation, and it was quite obvious. Um, like you said, those games are fantastic. Like the originals, super great, and that probably or is a huge cash grab. Now, I don't know if Resident Evil 3 would be in that same boat. It could be, but I want to think that it wasn't. But just because I think that it wasn't doesn't mean that it could be. You know what I mean? So, um, but
Exactly. But see, that's the thing. It's like nowadays you have to be careful because when other companies are taking over projects, like from another studio from Team Silent or the
mm,
studio for Metal Gear, because Kojima's not going to work with Konami again. We know this.
oh
It's
no,
blatantly obvious. So,
dude, you could tell Konami hated him at like near the end of the time that he was
oh
there,
yeah,
and there's
Metal Gear 5 is a testament to that.
And I don't know if it was, I don't know which Metal Gear it was, but there was a Metal Gear game where people were like doing this conspiracy thing where there was like notes and like little like voice quips that could have gave hints of how he felt about Konami and the things that they
Oh,
kind of like
that
made him do.
was Metal Gear Survive, I believe. It was the online game where you had to survive after getting sucked through a wormhole, and you could play with other people, and they were basically crystal zombies. And Kojima said, "There's no zombies in Resident. What the hell?
Not
There's no
Resident Evil,
zombies in
Metal
Metal
Gear.
Gear. Yeah, there's no zombies in Metal Gear."
Metal Gear.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Talk about like being dummy thick.
Colonel, I'm too dummy thick.
Hey, I mean those squats and those crawls. Hey, he had to be built like a brick outhouse. Let's be honest. Daddy
you just
Snake is always good.
you just hear, oh, I gotta find a way to get around him. And then the guy walks by and you just hear, who's that cheeks are
Exactly.
beat?
Exactly. See, but that's the thing. It's like there are good remakes. I'm not saying there isn't, but I'm
Right.
saying you have to be careful because if they and that's my fear about the new Silent Hill 2 is if they update it for modern audiences. Because the
Mm.
original Silent Hill 2 was so dark, so eerie. It had so much depth and everything to the story, which, again, spoilers, the main character was not an angel. He did some pretty shady stuff. That's why Pyramid Head was a representation to torture him because he was his I guess, penance in a sense
Mhm.
to punish him.
I, I felt like the whole world that James was in was all about like him, right? Like obviously Pyramid Head is like
Exactly.
the main thing, but the world around him was like all like the feelings he had and maybe the reasonings that he's done and just how grim
Exactly.
things that he did. That's why that Silent Hill exists. That's why like for a while people were saying Silent Hill is just not a place you go to and dark things happen. Silent Hill is a manifestation of your own hell. It is a
Exactly.
purgatory
And it
state
finds
where you go.
you.
Yeah. And the deeper you go, the more that your demons are reflected to you. It's like
Exactly.
I would say that Silent Hill would be like staring in the mirror and acknowledging that you have demons, and then you can either be one with your demons or try not to be that way. But with Silent Hill's case, that shit's already happened. So
Oh,
what the
yeah.
thing is that you go in there and it's to acknowledge that you've done those things and then move on.
Exactly. It's to grow from your experience to try and make you better. And if you don't become better, Silent Hill swallows you in a
Yeah,
way.
and you become part of Silent Hill, you
Yeah.
know. So that's the thing. And that's like the beauty of Silent Hill. It's so good. You know what? One of these days when we go to make another video, we should talk about the comparisons of Silent Hill and Resident Evil. The originals from 1 to 3,
I
okay?
agree to that full heartedly.
Because obviously they're in the same genre of like gameplay style,
Yeah, and
game
they
controls, game puzzles.
renovated horror. They set the standard for horror. They basically, like Metal Gear, paving the way for stealth platformers. Silent
Mhm.
Hill paved and Resident Evil paved the way for horror. Resident Evil did it with zombies and the typical horror, action heroes, zombies, that type of stuff, and then you with stars, and then you have Silent Hill where it doesn't matter where you are. It doesn't matter who you are. If you've
Mhm.
done bad, Silent Hill will come for you and it will reach out to you.
Mhm. Yeah, I think Resident Evil um I feel like it is more of a horror experience of like something that kind of would have like a realistic outcome because let's face it, a lot of them had like what was it from 1 to 3. I don't want to say you know, supernatural stuff because 1 to
What
3
you mean
didn't.
about how a medical corporation tests with vaccines and created a virus that started turning people? So, in
Yeah,
order
it's
to hide it, they did a cover up and then they had to nuke a
yeah,
city? Yeah, no, that is
yeah,
totally plausible rather
yeah.
than a psychological horror.
No. That's the thing though. Like one is not like a psychological horror. It's a horror in a different like state of mind,
Yeah,
right? Because if you think about it, if we were to actually ever have some kind of zombie thing, I don't think it would be a type of virus that would be the way that like Ramirez's zombies of the Night of the Living Dead would
yeah,
be, right? Like, oh, they come from the ground and then like they eat people. I think it would be some kind of cannibalistic like chemical imbalance in your brain, and it would be like a some kind of chemical that like someone makes in a lab that would somehow deteriorate your brain, and it would trigger a thing in your brain to go around and eat uh human flesh, like rabies or something. You know
yeah.
what I mean? So I think that's how I feel like it's in the more realistic realm, in my opinion, how Resident Evil from 1 to 3, because it starts to kind of go off with supernatural stuff later down the line of games.
It
Now,
does.
on the other hand, you have Silent Hill, which is like a psychological thing, and not a psychological in the sense that the game is fucking with you, a psychological sense of like the characters are going through like a existential crisis after their
Exactly.
afterlife. You know what I mean? And then it starts to make you think about that shit. Like Silent Hill from 1 to 3 is one of those games that makes you it makes you think, and then you kind of get in this state of mind where you're like, oh shit, like I know this is a game, and the way that they do it is like, oh wow, okay, it's very gamey and whatnot. But if you think the dark sides of like what's happening to those characters and the reasons why they do that is an actual real possibility that people go through and
Yeah,
some people have done, and it's really dark, and you're like, okay, that is a very scary existential crisis kind of thought to think through, and it might put you down in a rabbit hole that you might not want to go down, because once you go down it, it might take you hours to get out of it, and it might actually start you might start scaring yourself
I
because of
think
it.
our
But
ADHD is showing because we
it is,
really.
it is. But that's fine. That's fine. That's fine. We'll get back to the point. But my
Yes, we
main
will.
point is, but my main point is that like they're two different games,
Yeah, they
right?
are.
They're clearly two different games, and one makes you think very deeply, not about how to play the game, but everything that's behind it. It's like the lore of those characters, but within the lore of those characters, it's like real outcomes. Okay. And then you have Resident Evil where you're like, that shit can happen and it is pretty scary, but it's not going to put me in a state of mind where I'm down a rabbit hole being like, maybe I need to stop thinking about this.
I mean,
But
fair.
besides those, I might be biased, but I think I like the original ones better, in my opinion,
Yeah, I'd have
because
to
of
agree
like
with you.
because of like just sorry about that, folks. There was some apparently my Faja was barricading the wall so the zombies don't come in. But I like the originals more than the remakes. The remakes are very good. They're very fun. I recommend you go and play them. Uh, for Resident Evil 3, I would probably watch like a non-spoiler review before you decide playing that. But I will say, play the originals if you can. Play the remake of 1 and 2 of the Resident Evils if you can. It's
But
it's a good
like
time.
that's the thing with any game. I would recommend playing the originals if you can before trying to remake because yes, I love how they get new fans into these games. However, it kind of deteriorates the original games and kind of nullifies the impact that they had and the history they had when they do a remake like that. Just like when you can tell a remake is just a cash grab and not done too well. That
Mhm,
sets the new players coming in to be like, well, this game sucks because, like Silent Hill 3, when they did the HD remastered, they
mhm.
didn't sync the audio.
Ooh.
So, yeah, you'd see someone talking and it was watching like a Japanese film with English dubs.
Yeah.
And
I think
it was bad.
sorry.
It's all good,
Yeah,
but
it
that's the thing. It's like, yes, play the original, but also it's like some of these game companies with the remakes they do, you can like the original players can tell it's a cash grab because they can see the effort that wasn't put into it. They can see what was changed and everything. Like I said, I'm all for more fans coming to certain games when they do a remake or a re-release. But the
mhm.
thing is, it feels like nowadays everything's becoming just a cash grab. Like push it out when you can, and if it sucks, oh well. We made profits on previous ones that we don't have to worry about that.
Yeah, I think that companies should take like a page from like I'm gonna use Nintendo as an example. So let's say
Oh,
for
that
like
leads to another topic. Nintendo's not the best example you could use because thing
no 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 no
is,
no 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 no, and just hear me out,
okay, I'll hear
because
you out.
the reason why I say this is just an example. There are better examples out there, but the reason why I say this one is because um they made Breath of the Wild and they made Tears of the Kingdom, and there were a couple of times, or maybe it was just one time, where they were like, "Hey, we know this game was supposed to come out this date this year, but we wanted to make sure that there are as less bugs as possible, and we want to make sure that it runs well on the Switch. Well, they do the best they can. And even though that Breath of the Wild, when it first came out, like, yeah, it still ran pretty well, but there was a few hiccups here and there, but it didn't deter you from playing the game. You just noticed it happening at one point, and then you kind of just ran through it, and the game was fine. And there was other areas that kind of did that. But also at the same time, a game like Breath of the Wild is a huge game, so I kind of expect some kind of hiccups like that. But with games like, say, if they do a remake of like the first Silent Hill, if you keep the original Silent Hill like they did with like the original Resident Evil 1, that remake of Resident Evil 1, I honestly think that it's better than 2 cuz
I
like it's
actually
you
have
can.
to agree with you. The original Resident Evil 1 remake with the updated
Mhm.
graphics and everything, leagues better than any common remake that I've played so far because it was a literal remake.
Yeah, and not only that, even though it was pre-rendered graphics, look how beautiful that game is. There was a okay, this is just my
Exactly.
experience. There was a moment when I stepped into that area, it's like I want to say it's the dining room, right, where the fireplace is. There's a moment where there's these candles and the flame. It looked so realistic. Okay? Like if there's any game that like had zombie fodder. Anyway, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. We love Lucy. She's an adorable Pomeranian
No,
Chihuahua
just
furry
throw her to
football.
the zombies and they'll give you a quick escape.
No,
But why?
no,
But yeah,
I can't do that.
you're right. You won't. I will. It's
But anyway,
okay. Give me a Lucy.
back on topic. It's just such a beautiful game, and like yeah, the things are all pre-rendered like graphics, but you can't deny it is one of the most beautiful games I've ever seen.
I
Like if we're
agree.
realistically going for a graphic standpoint, which by the way, before they did the one for the PS4, it was on the GameCube, and the GameCube at one point
Yes, it
was
was.
one of the most powerful consoles. So when they
Yes,
remade
it
that game, it
was.
still looked amazing.
It
It
did.
still looked so good. And that's
It
why I
really
like don't
did.
get me wrong. Like don't get me wrong, those other remakes, they're good. And some of them are really good. But the way they made the original Resident Evil 1's remake, it was so good. You can have it to where you can free from run with your character, or you can do tank controls. I honestly um, did more of the free roam instead of tank controls, but sometimes I would go back and play the tank controls because my nostalgia. But the the way they did that game, because that game's not really that long, and like if you think of it in the scope of how big that game is, that game's not really that big. So like to put all of that other beautiful aspects in the game, the way it looks realistic, the way the surroundings are, the atmosphere, the monsters, everything about that game is, if I was to say what goes up as a remake, as a S tier remake, Resident Evil 1. It is so good. And it's
I would
so
have to
pretty.
agree with you. And that leads to the point where you were bringing up Nintendo, how,
Mhm.
and this still pisses me off, because, again, I'm not one to not talk shit on my favorite games,
Mhm.
but Majora's Mask remake,
Yeah.
they kind of butchered it in little small ways that if only you were a fan you would notice, such
Mhm.
as like they messed with the gameplay mechanics to where, and I found this is a common Nintendo thing, is it's always the gameplay mechanics. They
Mhm.
could make a beautiful game, but in Majora's Mask they introduced fishing, they introduced masks in different areas.
Mhm.
They upgraded the bomber's notebook to handle anyone and everything that either required a heart piece or a mask.
Mhm.
Then the thing that was the icing on the cake is they changed the way that Deku Scrub or Deku Link bounces in water. But they kept the same map and the same area, so where you would in the original do a spin attack to get speed and to go further, they took out that speed boost in the 3DS remake.
Yeah, it's crazy how there's small little quirks like that could really hinder your like nostalgia for the game. Now it's not going to hinder
Well, it's
your
not even
original.
nostalgia in the game. It was a gameplay mechanic to where
Oh, I
it
know.
takes you longer to reach a spot because now you have to go jump, 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 or jump, 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 die, rather than spin jump, jump, and get it.
Right. But I would also say that's kind of part of nostalgia, but also in a main aspect for mechanics, it it kills it for you because if you realistically think about it, um, having that makes it, for one, it's fun to be able to find a way to go faster. So if you find a better way to do it, you're going to do it and you're going to get to the next place because you want to know how to get there more. And instead of having to do this weird arbitrary like roundabout to get to your location, and you can just spin and it sends you quicker. It's kind of like skipping a rock across the water, right? So like you can lightly toss the rock without flicking your wrist, and the rock will skip. Now, if you move your forearm and you flick your wrist and let the rock go, it's gonna skip faster. But if you just, stiffen your wrist and do that, you're not gonna get the speed of which the rock travels to the location. And that's how I feel about the little spin dash in the original Majora's Mask. So you want that flick of the wrist so you can skip faster to your location. And not only that, it's
Exactly.
fun. Why
It
would you take the
is.
fun away? That's the whole point, is to try to make your game fun. Now, if you think
Exactly.
fun in the sense of, well, we're going to take that out because then you have to go all the way around to do this. Nobody wants to walk around to their destination. It's
Yeah,
just wasting more time.
it really is.
Now, I know that was a really weird analogy, but it was still on point with the whole
Yeah, it
skipping
was.
thing.
And see, it boils down to the whole point where remakes are good if they are done correctly. If they are just cash grabs, you can fill it, and then that company who did do the remake, if they're not as big as like Nintendo or something, it's an indie company they get, like the people they're doing for Silent Hill 2, or I don't
Mhm.
know if Konami's handling Metal Gear, but this can either make or break those companies if they're not faithful to the source material.
I'm going to be honest. Most companies that are like, "Hey, we're gonna make this remake of whatever," sends that sinking feeling where I'm like, "Look, I know you could probably do it, but behind the mind of the original person who made it, you're probably gonna have to like play the game to get a good feel for it."
Exactly. And you can't tell me team members of Team Silent are no longer in the game industry because Dead by Daylight
Mhm,
contacted Team Silent members in order
mhm,
to get Cheryl Mason in the game and Pyramid Head.
mhm.
And so
I
that's
think they
why I'm
still make
like,
games, don't they?
I think so. Let me check. Like,
They're
let's
probably not
see.
called Team Silent anymore, but I'm sure they probably make games. Um, my bad.
Let's
I didn't mean to
see.
cut you off.
Oh, you're
Also,
good. No, 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 no. So the last game Team Silent worked on was Silent Hill 4 The Room before they disbanded.
okay. Oh, that's a game I need to play,
It's
but I also
wonderful.
understand it is wonderful. Like the whole thought of it. I haven't got to play it, but I've seen people play it before, and then like watch how like things change and all that stuff. It's
And
fantastic.
you want to know what's
Some people
funny?
don't. Mm,
Same thing with Kojima. Team Silent was axed by Konami themselves.
so it's just a continuing bridge that they didn't learn from.
Well,
So
it's
what they're
just
doing is
like EA with Dead Space. They axed Montreal Games. And
Yeah.
luckily, a parent company picked it up for the remake and was like, hey, we really love the source material. We want to do this game justice. And if there's not a Dead Space 2 remake, I'm going to riot because the first one kept the source material. You could tell the creators were fans of
Mm-hmm.
Dead Space because they took it over, did a remake, and
Mm-hmm.
made EA a lot of money. And
Right.
now that's the thing with Team Silent, Kojima, everyone getting axed and not being able to work on these remakes. That's a little
Mm-hmm.
worrisome, and that's where it comes in, where it might seem like a cash grab to the company, like, oh, these people can do it cheaper. Like, yeah, we could track down everyone in Team Silent, but that's money, that's time, that's effort.
Right.
Whereas if you go to an indie company, it's like, hey, do you want to work on this, get a name for yourself, and, get a chance to earn big bucks? And that's
Hmm.
the thing. If that's the case, then remakes are going to suffer the more that they outsource just to a random company that doesn't like the product, if that makes sense.
I think it's fair.
Because Nintendo, their own IP, you cannot swing a bat at Nintendo. Are you kidding me? They've been going off forever with Mario, Zelda, and there was one more. It was Mario, Zelda, and
Metroid.
Metroid. Yeah,
They have like Wario Land, which is its own IP also.
exactly.
Um,
But see,
there's a couple
Nintendo's
other
still
ones.
going hard on this stuff. Not only that, but they own like one of the biggest games, which is Pokemon.
Well, well, technically, Game Freak owns Pokemon, and that
Yeah,
was
they
one
do.
thing I wanted to bring up. Nintendo publishes it, and
Yeah,
so like there's we're getting a little off topic,
a
but
little bit.
I will say this that Pokemon, the newer ones, this is just my opinion, and this might get me flambasted. Uh, have have a lot of like really bad like graphic designs, and there's some things in there that are kind of whatever, and it almost seems like they try to make new things and they kind of flop in a way.
Exactly.
But
Just
also, and like I said, this is my opinion because I don't really play a lot of Pokemon games anymore. I like the originals. I'm also a Gen 1 guy, so I'm gonna get a lot of hate for that because they're like Gen 1, blah 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 blah.
oh,
Listen, I'm
I'm a
just saying
Gen
Gen
1
1.
player too. It had the
Listen,
best
listen.
Pokemon.
Yeah, yeah. Listen, I'm just saying. I think Gen 1 looks prettier. Okay,
See,
I'm not
Gen
saying the
1
mechanics
all
are
the way
better.
up to about Gen
Oh
3 for
no.
me.
You're gonna cause a lot of problems with this, and
Exactly.
that's why we
Those
have an undead Pikachu that's gonna be on there.
exactly. See, Gen
but
1
but
through Gen 3 I feel like were the best designs, and then past that it kind of felt like it got kind of
yeah,
boring in a sense.
I don't know. You know what? Let's save that episode for people to hate us.
Yes, I agree. But
We'll
in
save a full episode
summation,
for that.
yes, we'll save a whole episode of toxic takes. And
But
again,
here's
everyone's entitled to their opinion just because you don't
yeah.
agree with us. It just, this is our opinion, this is what we've seen. It doesn't make it right or wrong, it's right to us. But someone who's a diehard fan of other things may have valid points, and we're not going to discredit those valid points.
Unless you're either me or Keeta, then we'll invalid our own points and yell at each other because that's what we
Exactly.
do
And then all of a
anyways.
sudden we realize we have the same point and been like, oh, good job.
Yeah, I mean, like that argument we had where you thought that Resident Evil 3 remake was the best one out of all of them.
I said it was the worst, you kinkless. Anyway, you know what? Let's wrap this up. So, in summation, are remakes good, Cade?
um, I think remakes are good, depending on like if they actually put the effort into it and they follow like the original design. I'd say make changes if it's actually needed and it improves like the modern style of gaming. You know, like so I think remakes are good, and I think they are. Uh, I shouldn't say that because you really don't need remakes if I'm going to be honest. Like you could just create a game
And just
that's good.
update it with the graphics and the times?
Well, no, but what I'm saying is like we really don't need remakes. We do remakes because we want to see the things that we like in modern times.
Yeah.
So I don't think they're technically needed. However, you can learn a lot from them, is what I'm also saying. But
You really
um,
could. And remember back in the day where if you died in a video game, it sent you back to the main menu? You didn't have quick save to save you. If you didn't manually save, you were fucked.
I still get PTSD with Ghosts and Goblins.
See, so you know it all too well. So yeah, as Cade was saying, all those points and everything were amazing. And like I said, if you have other points you want to point out about remakes, love them or hate them, let us know. Put a comment in. This is where you're supposed to talk, Cade.
Oh, sorry. I spaced out. I was thinking of the title of this episode where I was thinking of like we flip, I flop, hello remakes.
All right, I like that. I like that. Yes, now that we have the episode name out of the way, thank you, Kate, for that. We just want to remind you to like, comment, and subscribe. Again, comment, tell us, let us know what remake was your favorite, what remake you hated. Do you like remakes? Do you hate remakes? Let us know.
Mm-hmm. You know what? Ask questions about nerdy things. Also, we'll probably pick a few under the comment section, and we can answer your questions. I think that would be a fun idea because I know there might be some in the
Exactly.
future where one of us gets impaled with questions.
I agree, and we once we get enough questions, we might just throw it into a video answering what our takes are or what our views are. And in any case, it'll be a fun time because I guarantee there are some questions that Kate over there is going to be absolutely wrong about, and I'm going to be your leader as being absolutely right. Isn't that right? Ooh.
Add a question down below that will impale Keeta to the wall with questions.
Oh yes, bring it on.
Pick his answers apart.
Oh
I
Lord.
kid, I kid, I kid. Be nice when it comes
That
to
sounds
all the
like
stuff.
some toxic
But
masculinity
also,
right there.
let's not bring that in. Let's not. Okay, let's not get
Don't
onto
worry.
that topic.
No, I'm very
But
secure. Don't worry. We're good. We joke. We joke with each other.
no, I wish I brought more to it because like I honestly didn't have any problems when it comes to like certain remakes and whatnot. Like this was actually difficult for me to like add to the conversation. The only one I could think of was Resident Evil 3.
See, but
Besides
that's the
that,
thing. It makes you think. It makes you remember what you've done. That's what our
right?
conversations are. Because if you go
No,
in
no, I
one side knowing, both sides knowing everything, then it becomes an endless circle. But then when it's
right.
both putting their opinions, what they remember, like me and you, because I can
Mm-hmm,
honestly say I played the remake of Resident Evil 2 and 3 more current than I have
mm-hmm,
the original Resident Evil 2 and 3, and that's because of limited hardware.
mm-hmm.
Now, those are amazing games, like I said, but I don't. I'm going off of memory with those and what I remember, and that could, I can honestly say, could cloud some of my judgment on the
Right.
whole remakes.
Yeah. Well, um, subscribe, like if you want. Otherwise, go ahead and listen. Have a good time. That's what we're actually here for, is just to have a conversation and a good
Exactly.
time.
A chill,
So,
good time.
all right. And then I will be coming up with the next idea for our next episode.
Of course, so look forward to that. We will see you same place, same time, Sundays, and the time usually after we throw the video together. So join back us in 1 week, and if again this takes traction, we might do 2 times a week. But for now, we figured once a week, like 4 times a month, should be
Mm-hmm.
pretty good.
Yeah, it's a good time.
Agreed.
Um, um, sorry, I'm very spacey right now. You guys have a great time, and we will see you next Sunday.
See you
Ciao.
next week.